Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to another session where we discuss various social issues, compliments of traveling, and the amazing work that they're doing. So, this week we'll be focusing on human trafficking, and we have with us here today Miss Samantha Hudson, and we're hoping to be joined by Miss Savita LaCruz a bit later on. Well, Samantha, for those who might not be familiar with you, would you mind giving an introduction of yourself and what it is that you do?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Samantha Hudson, and I'm a project officer attached to ChildLink. I work on the project One Life 2, that deals with children with autism and their parents. Yes,
Thanks so much for being here with us, Samantha. It's great to have you.
thank you.
So I think we can just go right into the conversation. Um, a lot of persons might not necessarily understand what human trafficking is, but would you mind giving a overview of what human trafficking is, what it might look like?
Well, basically, human trafficking involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion, meaning that somebody can force you into human trafficking. They can like tell you with plans, like hopes, like okay, you're gonna get a job and you're gonna get these benefits and so forth. And then when you actually go into it, that's not the case. You don't get the pay that was promised, you don't get the treatment that was promised, and so forth. That's coercion, fraud. It's just plain trick you into going into the system, until they get it forced labor, sex trafficking, and so forth.
Mhm. Okay, so from what I'm hearing, human trafficking can take various forms. There's labor, there's forced sexual activity, and some of those other ones. I see we're joined by Parvati
It's,
Rangwell. Hi, Parvati, good afternoon. Can you hear us?
I think it's the
Okay.
same. It's Savita.
Oh, Savita, welcome. But if you can hear us, we can't hear you. You might be muted. But yeah, I guess we can move ahead and hopefully you'll be able to join. But yeah, just kind of going back on some of the points that you made, Samantha, regarding the various forms that human trafficking can take. I want to really pivot to another focus area because this is something that people tend to not recognize. They tend to see human trafficking as primarily being, something wherein you kidnap someone off of the street and then you transport them across borders to work when it's not necessarily only that. That is just one small part. But would you mind going into a bit of the various forms that human trafficking can take?
Well, human trafficking can take, as I said, sex trafficking. They force you into sex labor, forced labor as, and those happens mainly in like the construction and agriculture and mining areas. You know,
Mhm.
you put you work, they promise you these pay, and then when you reach to the areas, then you realize no, that's not the case. You're not getting the money that was promised. Sometimes you can't even leave at your own will. And then we have debt bondage. That's something most people don't know about, but it's, you enter in not, there's no, what should I say, no legitimate agreement, but sometimes you might take a loan from someone, or because you're in a
Mhm.
situation you need it, but not realizing that the payback is worse. So you hold this person all the time, and you might be working and say, "Oh, I'll pay you off," but you realize that you're working for extended period and you haven't finished paying back your debt. It's always something new coming up, and you have to keep paying, and you're working extra hard. They have said other
You
several ones, but
know,
those are the three main ones, because we have,
mm,
as I said, um, organ, those people that traffic persons just for harvest their organs and so forth.
yes, yes, I do know that primarily we tend to focus just on those three, and it really tends to bring the conversation in a very limited scope because there's definitely a lot of different avenues for trafficking. Human trafficking for work related to manual labor. I know you spoke a bit about that, and just like the fraud that is usually inherent in that. Do you see a lot of that within urban communities such as Georgetown, or is it mostly within other communities in rural areas or indigenous areas? Or is it something that's a bit more widespread? Because I don't think it's something that's necessarily really discussed when it comes to physical labor in particular.
I think mostly it happens within the like the interior locations and so forth, because
Hmm.
most times people aren't aware of their rights, so they're subjected to these things and they're not sure where to go and who to complain to, so they're just thinking it's probably normal. I think in Georgetown people are more aware. I don't want to say completely take it out, it doesn't happen in Georgetown, or but I think in those interior locations and so people aren't so knowledgeable about their rights. And
Hmm.
because of the getting out, in and out to the mainland where you can go to the Ministry of Human Service and so forth and seek assistance, so
Hmm.
that's where the difficulty comes.
Yes, of course. Thanks so much for that. Parvati or Savita, I'm not sure who is on, but if you can hear us, can you just let us know and if you'd be joining the conversation? Okay. Hi, I see your mic's on. Could you just indicate if you can hear us and if you'll be joining?
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Welcome.
I can hear you well. Yes, I'll be joining.
Okay, perfect. Could you just confirm your name for me, please?
My name is Savita La Cruz, working for, I'm a parent at home,
Mhm. Thanks so much for
and
being
for the
here with us
2 year,
today.
pardon?
And I was just saying thanks so much for being here with us today. It would
You're
be great
welcome.
to hear a bit more about you and the work that you do.
Okay, I am a hairdresser part-time. I'm also working part-time with potential achievers. I'm also mm, a housewife.
Perfect. Thanks so much. So we were just having a discussion about human trafficking and some of the various forms that that can take. Some of the questions that we've already looked at are, what human trafficking can look like and in what areas it usually happens. Would you mind? Do you want to maybe touch a bit on what human trafficking can look like and the different forms it can take?
Actually, from what I've learned or from what I've known so far about human trafficking, is basically where people would hire these girls. People would hire these girls so for sex acts, for sex works, or to enhance their business and so.
Mhm. Okay, would you mind going a bit more into that? Like I might understand what you're talking about, but for those who might be listening, just give them a bit more information on the elements of human trafficking in that situation, or some of the ways in which these women can be vulnerable.
Um, let's say, for instance, we have these Venezuelans, right? Their vulnerability are like food stuff and providing for their family back home when they come in our country. Now, people would use these girls. They have wicked businessmen and so would use these girls to enhance their business as to having them working and, you know, exploiting them and all sorts of things. So men underpaying them, but they would have to go through with that because they need the money, which is wrong on the businessman part, you know,
Hmm. Yes,
and that
for
shouldn't
sure.
be happening. Also, we have people who who have learned about that, you know, people just using these people, trafficking them for, well, I mean, I might be going into a little more deeper, but human trafficking can also lead to organ trafficking. They kidnapping them, they actually taking out their organs for trafficking as well. So human trafficking is not only about where sex is concerned, but it also has to do with their organs as well.
Mm-hmm. For sure, yes. Samantha did mention a bit of that earlier, and the fact that it's largely very overlooked. In Guyana, I'm not sure what the industry necessarily for that is. I don't think it might be as common, but it's definitely worth being in the conversation when we speak about human trafficking, because there, of course, are many victims of that. We were kind of touching a bit on aspects of sex work and trafficking. A lot of times women, they might go into interior locations, particularly in the Guyana context, and they seek
Yes.
out arrangements at shops and provide sex work. But there are those who take advantage of women and force them to work within these establishments. So this has created a bit of a confusion when it comes to the difference between human trafficking and sex work. How would you necessarily explain the difference between the two? How about we start with you, Savita, and then we go
Sex
to you, Steve?
work, I think sex work has to do where they choose to have sex. They choose to have sex with these men in terms of prostitution themselves. Whereas the human trafficking, they're, they don't agree to it. You know, they're forced into it. Sex work is there's a difference because they agree to it, and human trafficking is where they don't agree to it, but they're forced into it.
Thanks for that, Savita. Samantha, do you have any thoughts to add to that?
No, to me, that's my understanding also, because it's, if they're doing it sex work, they're doing it for their own, they see that this is a way they can generate some kind of income for themselves or their family. While with sex trafficking, they're forced into it. They are not getting any benefit, no money or anything of it. They have to do
Exactly.
it, whether they like it or not. But with sex work, they choose to say, look, this is how I'm going to make my living.
Mhm. That is very true. They are being forced into it when it's human trafficking. A lot of times, what tends to happen is that persons would even confiscate things like their passports or ID cards. So like they can't leave. They're literally trapped within that environment. And I think that when we often tend to conflate sex work and human trafficking, it also tends to really harm both persons in both scenarios. Because on one hand, you have sex workers who are trying to make a living, but often they are targeted by trafficking person raids, and they're being impacted by that. But then on the other hand, when it comes to human trafficking, because there's a certain perception of sex work,
Yes.
there's a negative perception of sex work, and so persons might know of someone who is being trafficked, but then because of this negative perception that is associated there, they view them in a negative way and they don't seek to help or offer any type of support. So it's important to recognize the difference between sex work and human trafficking, and recognizing the ways in which we can support persons in different scenarios. So I just thought that was very important to highlight. So, we've been talking a bit about what human trafficking can look like, but what available resources might there be out there for persons who might know or be aware of someone who is being trafficked? What are the available resources? Where can they go? Can they seek help? What support might be available? Can you shed any light on that?
Oh, I know for a fact the Ministry of Human Service has a department or tip unit, I should
Mhm.
say, the trafficking in person unit, and they provide support and crisis intervention and so for persons who seek them out. There's also a hotline, and there's an hotline number also for Spanish speaking persons who might be
Mm-hmm.
affected.
Yes.
There are grassroots organizations that work along with Childlink, the United Bricklayers, youth with purpose, potential achievers. They also do some work with these persons and provide counseling and so forth.
Thanks for that. Sylvia, did you have anything else to add to that?
No, dear.
Okay, good. All right, so we've talked a bit about what human trafficking is and looks like, but what more do you think can be done to really curb the different forms of human trafficking across the various levels, whether it's the individual level, the community level, the national level? What do you think can really be done to really not only raise awareness, but ensure that it's getting the type of attention that it needs?
I, in my opinion, I think more need to be done as it relates to policies that address human trafficking and the way these matters are handled. Continuous awareness and public education, because not just on a one-time base, but continuous and happening throughout. So it reached to the point where the common man, everybody know what human trafficking is, where they can go if they see or they suspect someone is being trafficked, who they can go to help or report that, look, I suspect this is happening, and they can get it investigated, and they trust. As I said, yeah, for me, it's continuous awareness and campaigns to say that this human trafficking is this, and so that people know the difference and know what to look for.
Definitely. Continued education is very, very important. Savita?
Yes, I'm listening. Actually, I can barely hear because the rain is pouring heavily here. I'm trying my best to listen.
Okay, could you hear me
Oh,
better now?
yeah.
Okay, now I was curious as to what you think can be done to really kind of stamp out human trafficking, whether it's at the individual community or national level. What type of support do you think might be needed to not only raise awareness, but really create change within the area?
Yes, raising awareness is one, but matters once it is known, it should be reported and police
Mhm,
action should be taken immediately. Because there are times when you report matters, the police is really it is delayed, and so sometimes it is
mhm.
delay on working on it. They don't act promptly. So it should be reported, and the police should be involved and take actions immediately.
That's very true. It's very important to have first responders really come to the aid when it's very necessary because, as you said, there's a lot of delayed responses, and that can often have a lot of very life-threatening implications to it. So, Samantha and
Also, I
Savita.
think also
Mhm.
I think the process that they have going on, I mean, to protect people in this country, it is a very slow process. The process needs to speed up.
Oh, yes, for sure. I agree completely with that for certain. So, Samantha and Savita, it's been great having you here. I was curious as to if there was anything that I might not have asked you that you feel important to highlight, or any lasting thoughts you would like to share with those who might be watching.
I just would like to encourage people to be more vigilant about trafficking, because it's not just a one person problem. It's all of us, all of our problem, because we have children, we have relatives, and we never know what's
Exactly.
gonna happen. So we need to
Mhm.
move away from that mentality where we think, oh, it's not my problem. I don't have to
Mhm.
deal with it. You know, it's a national problem, and we need to all think about it and educate ourselves.
That's so true. Yes, I would second that
Okay, well, thank
because
you
we have
both so
children as
much.
well, and
Mhm.
it's not about ourselves. It's about the entire community because it's not one person that makes a community. It's all. It's everybody makes up a community.
Yes, I agree with that completely. It's important for us to recognize that, we're kind of all of in this together. And we really need to look out for each other and take care of each other and provide the support where necessary. So, ladies, I want to thank you once again for being here and chatting with me today. It's definitely been a great session, and I look forward to having more discussions like these where we really try to unravel the issues that are plaguing our society. I mean, things don't necessarily happen all at once, but I do believe with conversations and continued work within these areas that we can get where we need to go. So I really want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to really be here and just
Thank
chat
you
with
for
me.
having us too.
Yes, thank you for having us.
You take care.
Bye.
Bye.